Hello, everybody. Today's June 18th, and this is a special session for our June time crunch. At your request, I am adding a 30-second, 30-minute session on chronic organizational and time challenges. So what I'll do, there doesn't seem to be anyone participating live, but I certainly invite you to join me with your questions. I'll give you an overview, and then at your request, I'm going to give you some general strategies on things that, according to research and according to current insights, seem to be helpful. All right, so here are just a few preliminary things. So first of all, the idea of what it means to be organized, what the passage of time means, and this idea that time is linear is a construct. It's not the general truth. And when we really look at it, that construct is invented by people for whom that construct works. So we have all those people who write smart materials and clever blogs about time management, who come out with books that explain how linear time can be improved even more for people who are also linear. So that construct gets perpetuated in those materials. And if that construct just doesn't happen to work for you, then those materials can be not at all helpful and, in fact, quite frustrating. So many of the people that I work with in my own practice as a coach do experience long-term challenges with managing time the conventional way. And so here's a few things, a few challenges that a lot of those people have in common. So if you have challenges in terms of organizing your time, being on time, structuring things around you, you probably have had those challenges for such a long time that you get a lot of negative feedback. So that feedback comes from parents to children, it comes from teachers to students, it comes from employers and supervisors to employees. And so as somebody who does not think in those straight lines, you tend to hear, why don't you just do X? Or it's simple, just do X. But for you, because your brain fires differently, that's not simple at all. There is no such just. And so the assumption sometimes from a world that is so fixated on this linear and grid thinking is that if you only tried harder, you could do it. But that's obviously not true. The people that I work with work 5 times harder to get everything done and to overcome those challenges. So it's not a question of not working hard enough. It's also not a question of being lazy or just not measuring up. Hello, Hyacinth. Do you want to switch your mic on? Hello.
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 Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hello. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Thank you. I'm Hyacinthe.
I was just in the middle of explaining some of the general challenges that have to do with a mind that kind of fires differently. It's not the same thing as thinking in straight lines. And so people that do have a different thinking model, kind of just the way they were born. That's not a choice or something that just you select not to use. It's there. So those people get a lot of negative feedback from childhood on, or from whenever the onset appears of that brain-based condition. So there's been a lot of research in that, and it's enlightening for everybody. So when we're looking back on people in history, you know, people that are now considered geniuses, a lot of them, I believe, fall into that category. And now the talk is more about, we hear the word neurodiversity. So that's more inclusive of different brain models, different thinking models, and not so much insisting on that just one model is valid and the other ones are less valid. But because people get so much negative feedback for not complying with this traditional time management, they tend to have a lot of negative self-talk. And I've actually seen that in our forum discussion here in Slack as well, where people say, oh, I'm really not good at this. I can't do it. I'm a loser. You know, I hear all sorts of things when I work with people. So the first challenge is to accept you think differently. Your mind works differently. And you're not a loser. You're not lazy. You're not a space cadet. You can do this, but you may need different approaches. So one thing that a lot of those brain-based conditions have in common is the tendency to switch between hyper-focus, so super high concentration, almost to the point of forgetting everything else, and then on the opposite end of the spectrum, kind of the inability to focus on things for very long. And then a different choice of priorities. So people who go into hyper-focus may choose to do something that may seem not super relevant to other people. So you have somebody, for example, that chooses to research an app for 3 hours, and the app is to pay their bills. Well, you might say, well, why didn't they just pay their bill instead of researching this app? But that's kind of a typical thing, you know, you choose priorities differently and then go into this almost this rabbit hole of hyper focus, and it's hard to get back out of that. Okay, so the negative self-talk sometimes stands in the way of finding better approaches that are sustainable and more positive. So people who are not linear thinkers, who are more in that neurodiversity camp and who actually may be in the majority when we put everything together, challenges they have is that it's hard for them to establish a routine, because there's just, whoa, there's always so much going on, and it seems easier to just follow things, or things are so confusing that it's hard to pick what to do first. People like that can be easily overwhelmed when there's lots of different things, different tasks. It's hard to know what to do first. So you may be living in a state of chaos where you're not sure, okay, I can't do this, so you do some of it and then you let it go because something else is more urgent, and that creates this chaos in layers. So I was going to talk about a few of the general strategies. I don't want to imply that everybody's the same and that there is like easy fixes. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just presenting a few strategies that may come in helpful for you. The general insight is that accountability is very, very important. So if you're living in a constant state of chaos, it can be very helpful for you to have a person that you work with regularly. There can be a partner or a coach or somebody who really holds you accountable for small things that you say you will do, so you follow through. It's very helpful to limit the number of choices you give yourself, or if you're dealing with children who may have attention deficits, don't give them too many choices. So when you start the day, say, don't say, do you want cereal or strawberries or peanut butter or eggs, or, make it two choices. That's just a silly example. So there's choice A and choice B. And that's very important to establish that daily routine where you tell yourself, I have very few choices and I will follow through on them. And we did some of that in the Monday challenge. The choice is A, to check in with yourself, and B, to look at your calendar. You can reverse the order, but you don't have other choices like, oh, let me read a book, or any number of other things. Super helpful to establish as many simple routines as you can. It's also helpful to have those at the same time of day. It's been found that if it's challenging for you, for example, to get enough sleep, because late at night your brain fires and you tend to do more things, make it a habit to sleep at the same hours. Make it a habit to eat your meals at roughly the same time of day, just so your body gets used to having those routines. Somebody's writing. Somebody's taking notes. And feel free to interrupt me. I see Helen is on and Hyacinth is on. If you have any specific questions, feel free to ask.
Well, I'm typing here, and if you check the chat, you're going to see a whole lot of stuff there.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave a few minutes at the end for specific questions. Okay, Helen?
I mean, well, they're just, I didn't know you could hear me and that my mic was on.
Yes.
So I assume my mic was off because last time I couldn't hear anything from people. So I just assumed that was the case. I had no idea my mic was on. So, but yeah, I heard you, and I thought, well, you're talking about neurodiversity. Okay, welcome to my world. I am an Aspie.
Yes.
And I didn't know if you'd ever noticed that from meeting me and my daughter, who's another Aspie, who you met at ATA.
Right.
And that's why I focus so much on the things that you've seen me focus on at ATA, and they get done.
Right.
Things that many other people just don't get done, I can get them done. I'll say that something starts and it's going to finish. And I tell you it's going to be there for 10 years, and it's going to be there for 10 years. Like Savvy. I mean, I said that was going to be there forever, and it's going to be there forever. By the same token, switching is very difficult for me.
Yes.
And I was hearing you describe me, and so I just couldn't help chatting there and telling you what was going on there. So that's why I thought,
thank you for sharing that.
That's what I thought, well, you're talking about these generic people. You're describing me, Dorothea. So let me just tell you what my life is. And see, that's the thing. I mean, you're describing me. When I'm intensely into something, I just can't get out of it. And I just can't. And moving to the next thing requires a walk around the block, which is a mile long in my house, in my neighborhood. So it's a 15-minute walk in the hills, or a cup of coffee, or doing push-ups, or something. But I can't just get out of that and be into something else in 3 seconds. That's impossible.
Right. There's that just again, right? That advice that you get so much is to, why don't you just? But
I can't. I would be a terrible telephonic interpreter, because getting out of one thing and being in the next one in 2 seconds would be completely impossible for me.
Okay, so Helen brought up something that also is really a good strategy. She's recognized that she needs that transition, and that she needs specific activities that take her away from her desk. So you described the cup of coffee or the walking or the push-ups, some physical thing that help her transition to the next thing. And so Helen is very aware of that need she has, and that's one super helpful step, because when people are not conscious, they forget to incorporate that transition time into their planning. So they go, okay, at 10 o'clock I'll do that, and at 10:30 I do that, but they forget that they need that at least few minutes of transition time in there to be effective. And if that's not happening, then the day just becomes more delayed as it goes on.
And it's not by at this particular time. It's like right after this video, I'm going to do something before I get into the next thing, because I can't go straight from this into the next thing.
Right.
Right after this chat, I'm going to do something. Then I have a chat with the ATA survey committee. I'm going to have to do something to get my brain into that before we start it, and something to get my brain out of that before I go on to my next.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. Yes, I'm quite familiar with that, but you need to make a conscious effort, right? Well, for some people that may come easy to just go, oh, here's my next thing. But for you, you need to be aware that you're making that transition.
Oh yeah, at ATA before my presentations, I spend the whole hour before that, the whole session before it, in my room preparing and getting my brain in that presentation zone. I can't go to a presentation right before my presentation.
Right. Yes. So all of those insights, that is what makes you such a successful person, Helen, because you've realized that there are personal strategies that work for you. And so what we're saying here is those strategies are not the same for everybody. Some people thrive on a lot of stimulation, and they may be able to go from one thing to another. So that the challenge is when you're neurodiverse, when you're not a linear grid type thinker, is that you explore what works for you. And good for you to have done that work and to understand. And I'm assuming you helped your children then too. You said your daughter has similar challenges, so you
both my kids do. Both my kids do. I homeschooled them.
Okay.
And so that was a good environment for them. And for social connections, they were in choir and orchestra with kids who like to do the same things they like to do. So that was great. And they did volunteer things to serve their community. And it was great. So now to keep myself on track, I've got an Apple Watch that tells me when my next thing is, so I don't forget to go to the next thing. So, sorry, I have to have that technology helps me to get to the next thing, because if not, I'll forget. I know it.
Yes. So that the technology is another bit, right? Some people have an easier time with technology. Some people actually find it harder, and they need simpler tools. So that's another general strategy
I was forgetting to get to appointments. Because I was so focused on what I was doing. I was not getting to appointments.
Yes. So you found that an Apple Watch is a helpful tool there.
I can't do without it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm finding that from my perspective, it's very helpful what I described in the Monday email to sit down at the beginning of the day and go, okay, what's on my plate? Instead of going hour by hour, I need to have that daily overview, and then I can plan on the transition times. Okay, I have an appointment, which means I need to be ready a half hour early, and I need to think before, theoretically, and after an event to plan for those transitions.
Yeah, sure, but as soon as I get into my book to review it, I'm going to forget everything else.
Yes. How do you, when you know that you do have a scheduled appointment, how do you pull yourself out of that hyper focus? Have you discovered good strategies for that?
My watch buzzes.
Okay. Do you
and so it goes, oh, okay, good. My watch, I have set things up so it warns me an hour before, and so it just kind of vibrates on my wrist, and so that warns me. Oh, I've got to check. Oh yeah, I've got to go there. I better wrap this up.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so that's an advanced planning tool, right? So I'm assuming you have some kind of a check-in procedure too. And I think you've mentioned that in the forum before, that you check your calendar in the morning and you make sure you understand what's going on that day.
Yes.
How do you plan deadlines?
What I do is I look at how I have a pretty good idea of how quickly I can get things done. And so I set my deadlines with a ton of pad. So if I know that something's going to take me 3 days for a client, I'll tell them it's going to take me 6.
Very good.
Well,
Okay, so you pad time in.
I pad time in. Well, first of all, I ask them how soon they want it. They tell me they want it in 6 days. I tell them, fine, no problem. I never tell them I'm going to have it for them in 3 days because I don't know. My mother-in-law could get 6. I mean, who knows? And so I say, oh, perfect, no problem. I never tell them it. And then we'll get it to them in 2 days, 3 days, fine.
Okay.
But often something happens in the middle, and I do end up getting it 2 days before the deadline instead of way sooner like I thought I could. But I never plan a deadline that's going to stress me. I never accept work on the weekends. I never accept work for the evenings. When they ask me for that, I said, well, you know, the price you're going to pay is crappy work because I don't do good work on the weekends and I don't do good work when I'm asleep. Do you really want that? I'll charge you more for bad work. Do you really want that? I mean,
do know, though, that deadlines can be a huge problem for people that aren't trained in focusing and aren't really clear about how to pad like you described. So I know a number of my clients regularly work through the night to make deadlines, and then they feel super stressed about it. So in those cases, we would work to do exactly what you just said, to build more padding into the daily schedule and to not think there's this traditional rule, okay, I can do 3,000 words a day. That's what translators tell each other. But that may not be true individually. It may be more true that you can do 2,000 very comfortably.
I don't think it's a question of words, Dorothy. When I've been at the ACES conference, and sorry for taking over here, but I've been at the ACES, American Copy Editor Society, and they say copy editors can only do 6 hours of good, intense copy editing work a day.
Yes.
I don't think we're all that different.
Right.
When I was in med school, getting ready for my anatomy finals when I was 18 years old, I graduated from high school at 18 years, and that's when I went to med school. I couldn't study more than 6 hours a day for my anatomy finals.
Right. Okay.
And that was,
Helen, I don't want to interrupt you, but we had a half an hour, and I promised I would give some general strategies.
And if I didn't take a day off on the weekend, I couldn't study the next week.
Yes. So what you've contributed here is really valuable because it means self-knowledge.
Yeah.
If you can do 6 hours, awesome. But if you can only do 5, then it's helpful to know that.
Yeah.
And then plan accordingly. So I think the general challenge is that people are driven by that very well-intentioned advice on just do this, here's how you do it. And that's where when we start searching, we find all those blog posts that say, well, it's easy, just do this. I think somebody brought up something about organizing shoes the other day. It might have been Virginia. And it looked so tempting and easy, but if your brain doesn't work that way, then the tempting, easy thing may turn into some torturous, very frustrating task. So what really helps the most is to become your own friend instead of trying to adopt kind of alien strategies that aren't yours and they weren't invented by people that have the challenges you encounter. Then you're a big step closer.
Exactly.
I wanted to mention too that there's CHAD. That's, I don't know what the acronym stands for. I should have written that down. So there's CHAD, CHADD. That's an association for people that struggle with attention deficit disorder. They put out an excellent magazine. It's called Attitudes. And there's lots of really good advice in there on how to work with children, on how to overcome work-related attention problems. So the latest magazine just came out, and it was great to read. There's always really good advice in there. So maybe in general terms, like really learn what works for you, observe yourself, watch when that negative self-talk comes in, and see how that's holding you back instead of bringing you some positive place where you can work better. Look for associations, for general information about the condition you may have. And then look for accountability. Look for groups or individuals that can work with you. So we're almost here at the top of the hour. Hyacinth, did you have any special questions that you'd like to ask?
No, thank you. No, not really. I think you've covered most of it.
Okay.
Exactly what you said for my problem.
Okay. What drew you to this call?
This call? Well, I saw my Slack is on my mobile phone, and it made a noise when you
Okay.
sent the alert. So that's why, and I thought I've got 30 minutes free in front of me. I'm gonna listen to it now.
Okay. But this is a problem that you're struggling with? Is that why you decided to listen in?
Yes, if I have no big project, you know, if I'm comfortable with time, I mean, of course, I've got lots of marketing to do, and like everybody, I tend to take my time, if you see what I mean, and I really work better under pressure, but I find it hard to put the pressure on me if I haven't got it. So, yes. I tend to go from one thing to the next, and sometimes forget where I was in the first place.
Yes. Yeah. So I just want to encourage you to think that that is more common than you realize. That is not like, it doesn't mean your brain is deficient or that you are not as effective as another person. It's just that you fire differently, that your mind needs different strategies.
Yes, but I mean, I try to make a list in the morning, but I never really put time on it. So I think what you said earlier, I will try this, you know, that by 11 o'clock I should do 30 minutes of marketing or something like that. I will try to make it more structured.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'll throw out one thing here at the end of the session. I was kind of, I had this idea of establishing an accountability group for translators who struggle with attention or time management. I don't quite know at this point yet what that will look like, but I would love to know if people are interested in pursuing that idea. I was thinking that we might get together maybe once a week or every other week for a virtual chat with a certain topic. So I would love to know your feedback if you're listening now. Or
maybe, yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm hoping that other people will listen to the recording and also let me know what they think.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's important to have someone to report to.
Yes.
It could be. I got a resource through American Medical Writers Association. Somebody mentioned that they work with a project manager for their projects. And so I thought, wow, she's just an independent writer. She works with a project manager to coordinate the juggling, because she's not a project manager. And I thought, that's interesting. Somebody like that, like me, can do that.
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can hold somebody to a task, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting concept, because I know even if it's a remote kind of task that I set myself, if I have to report to somebody how much progress I made, I'm going to work a lot harder.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
So I would I would just like to pursue this idea that I've bounced around for quite some time. And I thought, isn't it interesting how many translators kind of work in hiding, or how many freelancers work in hiding with those challenges, and how hard they work with that negative blowback that they're giving themselves. So even if they just realize, I'm not the only one here, there's other people with similar challenges, and here's how we overcome them, that might be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to wrap up this recording. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to phone in. Thank you, Helen, for sharing all your insights. And thank you, Hyacinth, for your questions and your feedback. So I'll post the recording, and then we can continue this discussion, hopefully, with other participants of the June Time Crunch.
Sorry for going on and on.
Don't worry about it. I thought that was very interesting.
Thank you.
All right.
Josie. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Goodbye. Thank you.